welcome back to our show. Today I'm going to talk about the Yoshida Trilogy. In this nice box that was released years ago and you probably can't get it anymore, you can get a sort of cheaper version from Arrow now, which has the films but doesn't have all the booklets and the nice box with the, doesn't have that, but you can still get it. And I urge you to get it because this is excellent. But it's for a certain type of audience. This is art house. This is real art house stuff. So you get Eros and Massacre, you get Heroic Purgatory, and you get Coup d'etat. 3 films from the Japanese New Wave, which they all hated being called the Japanese New Wave because they were influenced by the French New Wave, but they didn't like it even though they were influenced. But they were influenced by other stuff as well. So a lot of the 60s directors got into that tagline of the Japanese New Wave, and they rejected it. But I'm just going to go into this director, Yoshida, who after Coup d'etat, he retired for a while, said he'd done what he wanted, didn't make more films, but then years later he come back. As directors tend to announce retirement and then announce that they don't want to retire after all, or they need to make a living. Now, these 3 films are difficult to talk about, so I'm only going to do a kind of beginner's version. I don't think I could really go into much detail. Bulgarian Troglodyte has done more in this director than I've done, so I'd recommend you go to his channel. I think he did a longer version of Heroic Purgatory. I'm talking about that film with someone else, so I would say go to his channel. You'll find much more if this interests you here, but he's kind of the one to go to for this director. He's the one who told me about him, how great he was, and I've been saying I'm going to watch these films for about 3 years at this point. I think at least 3 years, but it just looked so intimidating because one of the films is like 3.5 to 4 hours long, and they're art house films. And sometimes it takes a while to be in the right mood for that kind of stuff, but usually Bulgarian Troglodyte that does sound enough good recommendations. They're not films you want to watch all the time, but when you're in a mood for them, they are very good. So, Eros and Massacre is the most famous one. Within a kind of line of, art house Japanese film, this is the one that kind of got the most attention. And I watched the director's cut of it on the recommendation from Bulgarian. Yeah, thanks. That was a very long film. It's actually my least favourite of the 3 films, even though it's a very good film. These films all take Japanese history as a starting point. Or sometimes it's close to history, like in this one, it's based on an event that happened in the 1910s. Sometimes, like Heroic Purgatory, is about the communists in Japan in the 1950s, which was something that happened, but we don't hear about it that much these days, really, because it was like China being overtaken by communists and it was spreading over the world, and the Americans were fighting it, and you had the Cold War, both in the kind of nuclear weapons area, but also in the different countries being fought over, like in South America and Asia, linked to Vietnam, linked to the Korean War, all that stuff. It was a difficult time, and basically because a lot of countries had despot leaders who needed to get chucked out, but what replaced them was difficult. And finally, you had Coup d'etat, which was about the right wing kind of in Japan in the 1930s, who feel like Japan isn't right wing enough, which would lead to changes within Japan that would lead to the war. So it's all about different social changes within Japan and what kind of mentality created them. That's what the films are really about, is the mentality behind people who were making movements within Japan that were going to have some import. As I said, I liked Heroic Purgatory and Coup d'etat a lot more. But it doesn't mean I disliked Eros and Massacre. It was just like, I watched the long version, and there was a section in here that I felt, was a bit long, which may have been better in the theatrical version. I don't know, I haven't watched the theatrical version yet. But it felt like some of the flashback scenes, you were getting so much information that sometimes I felt like it was overbalancing the film a little bit, the historical side of it, because this film has two time zones. There's the modern day time zone, and there's the historical time zone in the 1910s. And it actually has moments where the characters from the historical time zone enter our world and travel in a modern train or see modern architecture, to suggest that times haven't changed that much. There's much more of a blur between what we see and what was really true in the past, and how we actually romanticize the past. Because one thing you'll know is when you look at the past, people always seem to have a good old days feeling to it, or a simplistic view of it is like they're all into this, they're all into that, and actually, if you look at the past, there was always fighting between different ideals for any period in history. There's a problem with humanity is they cannot accept that every era has issues that are unsolvable, has lots of passions, some of which succeed and some which do not. But it's a process, and we're part of the process. If we say that the past is much more simplistic and we're trying to get back to that, that means we're cheapening the present by suggesting we have a reality that's attainable, when it's actually a fantasy. We've all got fantasies of our way would work better, and it's like, no, it wouldn't. It's just an ideology. All ideologies always lead to bloodshed and destruction. So it's like human beings are very flawed, and they tend to find any reason they can to sentimentalize everything to suit their own needs. And that's where this film gets that a little bit. I mean, it was influential on Alex Cox. It feels like, I'm not sure if he's seen these films, but it feels like he must have. Because in Walker, he was doing the same thing, and he's that same ethos of the past is always the present. It's like things happen in the past, happen in the present. They just happen in different ways. So, in one period, you might have a kind of left-wing revolt, another period of right-wing revolt, but it's like human beings are flawed in their own way. This director knows that, and he's actually looking at the way human beings are flawed and the way we're all imperfect. And that's probably a better way to go into films rather than going to exactly how they work, because I think it's like the films you have to be experienced. I'm probably just going to talk about how I experienced the films rather than try and break them down too much. But the first one, Eros Massacre, is based about a guy who was a left-wing revolutionary in that time, who's trying to practice free love, and he was on the run from responsibility you have with people who you love. He felt we could love each other in a more relaxed way that was more kind, but he completely ignored, lust, possessiveness. He was trying to break free of that, and he kind of ignored the fact that human beings cannot break free of that. That's our nature. Damn it. The only way to break free of it is just not engage, and that's a lonely life as well. And it's like him mixing this kind of revolutionary left-wing ideology with this that causes havoc for himself, and it's placed against the 1960s, where there's much more free love, and you see what's done there, where people are having casual sex but it doesn't mean anything, and they've got they're following that ideology, but there's nothing there to them, and they're trying to find their own reality in the world. So it shows there's no real cure for any of the ills we're trying to build an ideology around. It's like you're trying to deal with human nature and its complexities. You're trying to build something simplistic to contain it all, and it can't be contained. And this film going back and forth in time, and the people interacting with people from our time, you've also seen the film is aware of the fact, it's very directing, it's aware of the fact that these are actors playing these parts. These are not the people involved. You try and make them similar enough to the people. They're based on people. One of the people who the story is based on was offended because she ended up doing time for attempted murder, and she did not like it when brought back up years later. So there was lots of issues involved in the film. but it is about the failure of this ability to understand humanity. And that's what continues on to the other two films. Now, Heroic Purgatory takes the going back and forward in time and displacement of people into an extreme where you don't really know what's going on half the time. But that places you into the mentality of the people who have totally disconnected from their reality, where these are the communists who have all these little subcultures, and they've all got their own little version of purity test of, are you good enough for the communist revolution? And it goes back and forth in time to where it began, where it leads, how they're all paranoid, but someone's a double agent, and this sense of human beings are hungry for paranoia and hungry for things that will interest them, even if it's just fantasy that will destroy them. Even if it's that, they will go for that. They will urge towards it, even if they're trying to dissociate themselves from feeling to be good little communists and to see themselves just in blocks of what's best for the party. They still can't get beyond the messy human nature. But they're always thinking they're above it. And so this film is disconnected nature and time zones and how things float into each other in strange ways, and you try to work out who's who and why they're doing things, and it starts to focus where you can find a way around the time zones a bit more, but it's also the emotions behind everything is strange, and how people are dissociated from the past and try to understand their past and try to understand the present and how they're affected by other people, and they're not happy, is the best way to put it. They're really not happy. And it's about that kind of how human beings just cannot get it right, even if they try and purge all emotions. And they're still paranoid. They're still going to kill each other. And it's like it's about the breakdown of the communist ideal to how it just fell apart because human beings are human beings, and how destroying your inner life does not help you. Everything just comes out in different ways, to madness, to fantasy. It's always still going to come out because ideology is a fantasy, and unfortunately that's part of human nature, and we're all attuned to that, and we all have that, and we all screw up because of that. So this and Coup d'etat are my two favourites. I don't know which one's my favourite because they're very different to each other. Heroic Purgatory is kind of just all over the place, but it makes some sort of dreamlike sense, and then it makes much more like a literal sense the more you figure out how it ties to people and how they're all make sense. I could not describe it though. I cannot tell you the plot is. It's just a feeling, which I thought was wonderful. Finally, we have Coup d'etat. Coup d'etat is terrific. It's about a right-wing revolution this time, and it's the military leaders who think that Japan is soft. Around the 1930s, they're dealing with China's having its various infighting and revolutions, and they've had one revolution, but they haven't got the communist revolution yet. So they have to deal with China. They have to deal with China, with all these other countries nearby. They just feel like the country's gone soft with the kind of the idealism of the kind of what we saw in Eros and Massacre, and people are ignoring their heroic past, which was the samurai and all the rest of them. They want to push the time back to when those ideals, even though you've now got technology, those ideals could ring true, and you could take over other areas and be like the warrior race again. And they're going to take over. They're going to save the emperor from himself and destroy their enemies, kill their enemies, and create a revolution within the ruling class of Japan and make them far more brave. Well, again, just like the left-wing ideologies, this is ruled over by weak people who have different ideologies. The guy whose writing is based upon, he is just like the guy from Eros and Massacre, a very flawed character who is very dislikable because he's selfish. He completely ignores his flaws, and other people have to pay the bill for his flaws always. until basically the end. And it just causes disaster. And you've also got these military leaders who are scared of women, so they have to put women in their place, and they have old-fashioned views because they can't deal with modernism. Even though at that point Japan wasn't that modern, for them it was too modern, and they couldn't deal with women helping them and women being a useful instrument to them, even though women were in their lives all the time, but they couldn't find a way to deal with that. And then you had the kind of soldiers who are scared of what they were being asked to do, who are joining up to try and find a reason to stop being scared about how the future is moving towards and what the future holds. So they've been brought in. So those characters represent, well, there's basically one character you see, but the seriousness is more like him, who are easily led because they don't know what to believe, but they're terrified of what to believe. They want to believe in something, and that's the best I've got. So it is a bit of chaos within the right wing, revolutionaries, as we've had two films about chaos within the left wing revolutionaries, and they've almost tried to be defined by their personalities and what is right and what is wrong, rather than the Purgatory. They're trying to purge themselves of personality. That's when they're trying to define personality, but it's going to the same aim of nothingness. They're just like, this ideology does not work for them or anyone else, but it does push Japan. Even though the revolution stopped, they are executed. Their example pushes Japan forward to war, which is a disastrous war for everybody. So it's like it's almost like the original infection that's going to infect the entire politics of Japan and create disaster. So these three films are astonishing. They've got amazing cinematography and just the framing of the shots. They're all in black and white. I mean, Eros and Massacre is on widescreen. The other two are in 43. But the way they frame characters when they shot, where there's lots of high, empty whiteness, and all three are in black and white, and they really use a contrast of black and white beautifully to suggest it's a dreamlike atmosphere, but it's not at the same time. But it shows you that this is a film and this is fake, and it reminds you of that all the time. And just the framing reminds you it's also this theatrical, but it's also shot for filmic comprehension and pacing, so it's really well done. In a way, it's very difficult to explain, you just have to see it. But these are just beautiful films, and I'm not going to go any further than this. This is hopefully like a primer to go watch the films, but these are amazing. These are really terrific. But they are art house films. But if you're going for a fight film, this is not it. You're not. I mean, even going for like a more arty film, like a Mickey film in the 90s or the 2000s. This is not it. This is something else. This is pure 60s Japanese new wave, even though they hated the name. So enjoy. It's great, but it's for a certain audience. So that's me for now. I'll see you later, right? Bye.